So do we start now?
Hello.
Please mute your phone.
Dear organizers, should we start now or we have to wait for a minute?
Yes, sir. Just hold on.
Hello.
A very good morning to honorable chairs, esteemed speakers, faculty member, research scholar, students, ladies and gentlemen. Today is the last and the final day of our two-day international seminar on relevance of Babasaheb, Dr. Ambedkar in contemporary anthropology, organized in courtesy of Were Ambedkar Chair by Department of Anthropology, Calcutta University, for observing the Mahaparinivas Divas of Babasaheb, Dr. Ambedkar. The present seminar being sponsored by Dr. Ambedkar Foundation, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India, focuses on reviving the views and thoughts of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar on number of issues including caste discrimination, social inequalities, issues of marginalization, and how it finds its pertinence even in current anthropological discourses, and indeed making this very seminar an instrumental in bringing out the excellent feat of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, ever relevant in different branches of social science and of course in contemporary anthropology. We are now going to begin with our first academic session, and in this session we are going to have four eminent speakers, which includes Professor Devi Chatterjee, Professor M. Thomas, Dr. Murshid Alam, and Dr. Ravikant Kisana. For chairing this session, we have among us Professor Deepak Kumar Midya, who is the Professor of Anthropology at Vidyasagar University and a distinguished anthropologist who did extensive works on various fields like ethnic identity, social unrest, tribal problem, Maoist violence, indigenous people, and reproductive behavior of tribal and Muslim women. Dr. Professor Deepak Kumar Midya is joining us through online platform. Welcome, sir. Welcome to the department. With your permission, I would like to give the introduction of the speaker before their speech.
Sorry, I'm muted.
Thank you, everybody.
Sir, if you permit,
Before
then
introducing the speakers, just I will say a few words about this seminar. Respected faculty members of the Department of Anthropology, Calcutta University, esteemed speakers of this session, faculty members across the country, research scholars, students, and the participants. I welcome all of you to this academic session, which is the fourth academic session of this international seminar on Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's relevance in contemporary anthropology. And you know, one of the major issues anthropology is dealing with from its very inception is addressing inequality and injustice. And Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, a liberal thinker who challenged the social discrimination against Dalits, women, and laborers, believed that the social justice is all about liberty, equality, and fraternity. The discrimination is deeply rooted in a hierarchical society like in India, And even after 75 years of independence, still social injustice and inequality vis-a-vis discrimination have been the greatest threat towards achieving real democracy, where a weaker section or a minority community can freely express their views or enjoy their legitimate rights in its true sense. Here comes the relevance of Dr. Ambedkar in order to understand not only the domain of injustice, but also to find out the probable way out to face the challenge. So, with these few words, let us listen to the views of today's distinguished speakers on the relevance of Dr. Ambedkar even today. And as the introducer has spoken about the speakers of today, may I request the introducer to introduce our speakers.
So, may I call the first speaker, Professor Devi Chatterjee, to come on dais for felicitation?
Okay.
I would now request Professor Devi Chatterjee to come on dais for
So
felicitation.
You should give a brief introduction about Professor Devi Chatterjee, or may I give a brief introduction?
Sir, if you permit, then I can give on your behalf.
Yes. You can introduce Professor Devi Chatterjee.
Ma'am, you first come for the felicitation, then before your speech, I would like to give your introduction. Professor Devi Chatterjee is being felicitated. Ma'am, please come on the dais. Rights and Duties Education, Department of International Relation, Jadavpur University, Kolkata. She is also the former visiting professor at Department of Human Rights and Human Development at Ravindra Bharati University, and also worked as a guest lecturer in the Department of Sociology, Calcutta University, and also in Human Rights Program, Department of Anthropology, Calcutta University, spanning for about 31 years of teaching at university level. She has authored a number of books and had made incredible accomplishment in the field of human rights, Indian society, social problem, Dalits movement, thought and struggles about caste, Marxist idea and movements in India, gender issues and public administrations, and many other. Apart from this, Professor Chatterjee is also the founder editor of the journal Contemporary Voice of Dalit. With no further delay, I would like to request Professor Devi Chatterjee to start with her speech for this session, and this session is chaired by Professor Deepak Kumar Midya. Professor
Welcome,
Midya,
Welcome. Now the dais is yours. You will get about 30 minutes.
Wishing everyone a very good morning. It is indeed an honor to be invited to this very important two-day seminar on Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. I must thank the department. I thank the departmental head. I thank the Babasaheb Ambedkar Chair Professor. I thank all the other members of the department, and of course, very enthusiastic students who form the backbone of the department, a department with which I have been associated for a very long time in different capacities. It's like homecoming. Now, within a very brief period of time, the first thing I would say is, please forgive me, I am not an anthropologist. And hence, what I say might sound a bit of an audacity on my part. In spite of that, the question is, why do I dare to tread into this field and make a presentation here? I would say, in my vision, anthropology is like the mother of all physical and social sciences. It is the crucible within which the other sciences grow. And probably for the other sciences, it is not possible to bypass anthropology. And hence, well, I'm here today and I shall be sharing a few words about Dr. Ambedkar. The title of my paper is Lessons for Anthropologists on Unraveling the Secrets of Caste. Ambedkar's exposition on the why, how, and when of a system. Now, Ambedkar had a holistic vision of life and society. His was an ongoing pursuit of social justice that we find. Right from the very early years, we find he was steadfast in his commitment to social justice till the point of his death. And this commitment really was being nurtured, one, by his own lived experiences as being born in an untouchable Mahar family, and the extent of academic expertise that he acquired from different countries, and also his own exercises in the field. I shall not go into his life story, one. I shall not go into his political movements, because we shall not have time to discuss all those. And I presume everyone here is more or less familiar with these. So both these areas I shall bypass and go on to my discussion. His journey in life really was in search of moving from a fragmented Indian society to a unified, integrated Indian society. That was his search in life. The Indian nation, to build up the Indian nation in terms of the modern language of politics. The Indian citizenship, which he really found was absent. A society hierarchically structured and fragmented, marked by graded inequality. So from that society, a society of graded inequality, Ambedkar was trying to take India towards an integrated vision of a nation, a modern Indian identity. And for that purpose, he was looking at the totality of human existence. He was looking at society and social formations. He was looking at economics. He was looking at the political system. He was looking at religions and cultural forms. Now, from a critique of Hinduism, as he developed it over time, he moved towards the acceptance of Buddhism as a solution. And that on the basis of a code of behavior. Now, what I would emphasize here, and what is not very often emphasized, however, is Ambedkar's acceptance of Buddhism was with a difference. Navayana Buddhism. He added certain principles to the codes that were prevalent. And all these really were codes of behavior that people in India should be following in their interactions in society, in their interactions with one another. How they should behave. It was not a God-based religion that he was in search for. He was in search for a religion that would place people at a higher level of human interaction and a position of equality and social justice. I shall focus on certain specific works of Ambedkar. One, which has already been discussed, I think, yesterday in several papers, and very rightly, Castes in India, which was his first paper and which was a paper which was submitted at Columbia University Anthropology Seminar, 1916. 1916, we are all familiar with this paper. He was then a doctoral student at the university, and this was really his first serious work that he was doing. Castes in India, their mechanisms, genesis, and development. The second work that I emphasize is Annihilation of Caste, 1936. An article which he wrote for a seminar he was invited to, but a lecture he was not permitted to deliver, and the program was cancelled because it was too radical. So Annihilation of Castes is the second article which I would emphasize. The third one which I emphasize is Who Were the Shudras, 1946. Who were the Shudras, the subheading being how they came to be the fourth Varna in the Indo-Aryan society. The third work which I emphasize. The fourth work which I emphasize is The Untouchables. Who were they and why they became untouchables? 1948. And the fifth work which I emphasize is The Buddha and His Dhamma, which was published in 1957 after Ambedkar's death. So these are 5 works which I draw your attention to. In Castes in India, before presenting his own arguments, we find that Ambedkar had examined the views of 4 noted scholars on castes, Senat, Nesfield, Risley, and Ketting. Very briefly, their mistake lies in trying to define caste as an isolated unit by itself and not as a group within and with definite relations to the system of caste as a whole. So here, very significantly in this article, amongst other things, who were the Shudras? So we have moved from one point, the system, we have seen how the system was being handled to ensure that caste survives through endogamy, division of labor, etc., etc. Now, who were the Shudras? What was he pointing out about the Shudras? According to Ambedkar, they were part of the Aryan communities, part of the Kshatriya Varna. And there was a time when the Aryan society recognized only 3 Varnas, Brahmins, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. And there were continuous conflicts between the Brahmins and the Shudra kings. As a result of this, what happened was that the Brahmins refused to give them the sacred thread. You know, actually one backs the other. Now when the Brahmins refused to give them the sacred thread, what was happening was, with the loss of the sacred thread, the Shudras became socially degraded. And they became the fourth Varna. This is the thesis that we find that Ambedkar is presenting regarding how the Shudras really became Shudras or ostracized in the Hindu society. Now, in the Untouchables, who were they and why they became untouchables, which I have already referred to, 1948, which was being written in 1948. You will find this in, if anyone's interested to read up further, you will find it in volume 7 of the collected works of Babasaheb Ambedkar, brought out by the Maharashtra government. He emphasized that when the cow was being celebrated by Hindus, a section of the population was eating beef. Who were they? They were the broken men, as he said. These were the broken men. Different tribes had been interacting with one another earlier, fighting with one another. In the process, some came as the settled community, the victors. Some that made them untouchables. So two factors went into the making of the untouchable according to Ambedkar. One, they were broken men, not part of the settled communities. And being broken men, they were stigmatized in a sense. Being broken men, they were considered as not part of our group. But what made their position really worse was the practice of beef eating. So these were the two factors he's highlighting. And interestingly, he is distinguishing between impure and untouchable. Being impure is not the same as being untouchable. Impurity came into existence as a concept here with the Dharma Sutras. Untouchability comes later, approximately, according to him, around 400 AD. And that is the time when the Gupta kings made eating beef or killing the cows a capital offense. So at that time, with beef eating really, untouchables became ostracized as they were. So here we find mainly in this publication, in this work, we find mainly 2 points being highlighted. The status of the broken men and beef eating, which is very, very significant in the, making the untouchable what he is. And finally, in the last publication which I have referred to, the Buddha and his Dhamma, it is really, it's a voluminous work of Dr. Ambedkar, and it is really a work which is the culmination of a long process of, research and contemplation on what should happen to the marginal sections of the population? Where should they go? By the mid-30s, Ambedkar was clearly convinced that they should leave the folds of Hindu society. Hinduism does not give them space, does not give them justice, and would not give it to them. Because annihilation of caste, which he was focusing on, was not possible within Hindu society, that he was convinced by the 30s. Which made him say that I was born a Hindu, but I shall not die a Hindu. But then the question was, where do I go? Where should we go? He searched for it, the alternative, in different religions. He contemplated whether we should go to this religion, that religion, Islam, Christianity, Sikhism, etc. And finally he settled with Buddhism. And that was because Buddhism gave a place of honor to all people. And it is significant that when he got converted to Buddhism in 1956, that was shortly before his death, it was not an individual conversion that took place. It was a conversion which was part of a movement. The conversion or the Dharmantakaran was part of an ongoing movement, not just a religious conversion of an individual or a group of people from one to the other religion. It was a part of the struggle for social justice, coming from, as I said, the frame of trying to find a code of human behavior, that would be honorable for everyone in the region. So actually, through the entire process of his life, if we look at it, we find that he was searching for a panacea. He was searching for, first, looking at the roots of the caste system, examining its process of evolution, analyzing the detrimental impact that it had on Indian society. I'm not going into those details, we don't have time. The many practices that went with the caste system, and rejecting Hindu society and seeking to move away from it to another frame. Through his search for the panacea, we find at one level his was a political struggle. At another level, he was looking at constitution making. He was participating very actively, playing a very crucial role in the constitution making process, drawing up the Indian constitution to be as democratic as possible within the limited conditions of the situation. At another level, he was trying to educate the depressed classes, as they were called then, the untouchable castes, through his writing, speeches, etc., parallel to his movements. And finally, but as a culmination of the entire process, he was looking for a religious, cultural transformation in Buddhism. And this, I think, has lots of lessons for all of us to learn from. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, madam, for your very, very interesting and illuminating analysis of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. We will take questions and comments after all the speeches being complete. Now we will invite our second speaker, Dr. Joseph MP. He is an alumnus of University of Bombay and Delhi University. Dr. Joseph is an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology, University of Mumbai. He has been in teaching for more than 10 years, and his research interests include sociology of religion, political sociology, post-colonial studies, Dalit sociology, and masculinity. He has a good number of articles in journals and edited books to his credit. So may I now invite Dr. Joseph to deliver a speech. Dr. Joseph, the dais is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Medya, for that introduction. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. I hope I am sufficiently audible.
Yes, so go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks to Professor Bakshi for this invitation from the Department of Anthropology. And also, I appreciate you making it a hybrid kind of a platform. And I'm sure it will have its own technical difficulties, but I think you all have managed it very well so far. Also, I apologize that yesterday I couldn't be part of the seminar for a long time. I bits and pieces of time I got, and I logged in and logged out a bit. But today I will be there, and it's nice to be here with all of you. All right, so Babasaheb Ambedkar and anthropology. So when I begin to reflect on that particular title, I would also like to talk about myself a bit, because I'm not in the domain of anthropology strictly. My training is in sociology. But however, in Mumbai, we have this particular privilege of having a department of sociology, which also has cultural anthropology papers. So my initiation into anthropology happened in Mumbai University Sociology Department with Professor Momin and Professor Michael and others, Professor Kamla Ganesh, who were professors in cultural anthropology in the department. And then obviously I shifted to Delhi for my MPhil and PhD in the Delhi University's Department of Sociology, which also uses a lot of anthropology and theories and all of that. So that's the only kind of an exposure that I have in anthropology. So what I actually present may be more sociological than anthropological. So that's kind of a caveat that I would like to initially talk about. All right. Also, like what I would be presenting is more of a thematic kind of a presentation based on my field work, because my PhD thesis is on the Naubaut Dharam, the Neo-Buddhist religion, where my field work, which I engaged in, was in a particular locality called Ambedkar Nagar in N7 Sidco area of Aurangabad city in Maharashtra. And then basically the most of the interviews and other kind of data collection I did in the city of Aurangabad particularly. So I'm actually drawing on from that field work to relate to some ideas of Babasaheb Ambedkar, as it would be very much relevant to the discourses of anthropology in Indian society today. So that's the attempt that I'm making. So initially I will just broach on a couple of themes, some of which have already been done, a couple of points I would actually talk about it. And then I would launch into what is my kind of a little bit of an expertise, which is on anthropology of religion and sociology of religion. So from that perspective, I would be looking at Babasaheb Ambedkar's kind of interpretive intervention of into Buddhism, which is the Navayana Buddhism. So my focus will be more on that. All right, so part of the paper, I would be a little bit of a paper I'll be reading out, and the rest I will be thematically talking about when it comes to the part of religion. All right, the intellectual legacy of Babasaheb Ambedkar is aligned with liberal philosophy with a strong emphasis on human rights. His intellectual contributions, political activism, religious innovation, and statesmanship are marked by his critique of normative liberalism as well. He locates himself on the premises of universal reason and humanism to mount a scathing critique of Brahmanism. He has proposed a reading of Indian history which bestows a unique sense of agency on people belonging to the ex-untouchable jatis. Building up on these premises, he interprets Buddhism to be a religion best suited for a socially anchored democracy. this focus that he has given to Buddhism mirrors in some ways the arguments made by his teacher at Columbia, Professor John Dewey. In addition, his interpretation of Buddhism brings in the anti-Brahmanic tenor of that religion, and he locates the recovery of the lost agency of Dalits in the parameters of modern Buddhism. Having said that, Babasaheb Ambedkar's academic and political interventions were marked by an interdisciplinary approach, which was obviously very, very normal in those times. He has taken courses in economics. I mean, his publications are in economics, his degrees are in economics. Then other degrees are in jurisprudence and legal area. Then he had papers in anthropology, he had papers in sociology, political science. So it was an interdisciplinary kind of an approach, and some of which are also very highly philosophical. But there are a few themes in his life and work that have very important bearing on the theory and practice of cultural anthropology in India. Of particular importance are his essays. Professor Devi Chatterjee has given a very insightful analysis of all of his publications, but particularly when it comes to cultural anthropology, especially we all know that at the formation of the new nations in the 1940s, the latter half of the 1940s, the genre of village studies became something very much popular among cultural anthropologists. In a way, I would argue that it has got a continuity with the earlier peasant studies pioneered by Robert Redfield or people like Chainov and others. And then there is a way in which using some of the categories of Robert Redfield, some of the anthropologists, particularly in India and other places, have gone into begin something that became a prolific area of anthropological research and writing in India, which is village studies. And we all know also that almost all of these village studies, the pioneering ones, S.C. Dubey's one, or Andre Bette, or M.N. Srinivas, or many others who have done over a period of time, many of these village studies kind of an approach that they have adopted. One of the mainstay of their analysis has been caste, the other being tribe and all of that. Obviously, the tribe is also a very important kind of a category. So when it comes to the analysis of caste, where Professor Srinivas makes this very important distinction between the field view of caste and the text view of caste. So in that, it is in that kind of a debate and the ideas generated on the study of caste that we have very interesting contributions from Babasaheb Ambedkar, which have not been taken into account in academic discourses on caste in anthropology or sociology at many levels. Like, for instance, his treatise on caste in India and his another treatise on Annihilation of Caste, both of which offer competing explanations to the genesis, sustenance, and continuation of the caste system, as well as the methods which are needed for its annihilation. And we will see that drawing on, when Babasaheb Ambedkar actually talks about caste, he draws on from the scholarship that is already available. And so that, I mean, he quotes Senat, he quotes Risley, he quotes Ketkar, he quotes Nesfield, all of them in the work on caste in India. In the work on Annihilation of Caste, it is a little more polemical because it was a talk meant for the annual conference of the Jatpat Todak Mandal in Lahore, and so that is another tenor. But in Annihilation of Caste, also he brings in a lot of ethnographic detail to make his argument from the very beginning about certain studies on the kind of atrocities and discrimination happening on untouchables in different parts of India. He brings that into discussion when he makes the point, the final argument of the Annihilation of the Caste, when he says that a good Hindu practices the discrimination of caste just because he wants to be a good Hindu. And if that is the case, the problem lies in the religious scriptures that that tell a person that to be a good Hindu, we need to do it, and therefore something has to be done to those religious texts which actually legitimize the system. So he comes to that conclusion in Annihilation of Caste. And when he logically makes the argument, there are a lot of anthropological material that he is bringing in, and which is very important to note on this case. Okay, now another kind of a point I would like to talk about is, like when you read castes in India, there is a point that he makes again and again in that essay. That is, he talks about the cultural unity and the homogeneity of the whole of India. And then there's a quote there where he says that caste is a parceling out of an already homogeneous unit. And the explanation of the genesis of caste is the explanation of this process of parceling, because he looks at the homogeneous cultural unity of India. And it is also important to look at the point of the caste system anchored on the principle of holism. If you remember Homo hierarchicus, Louis Dumont makes this point, that the Indian civilization has its a kind of a holistic approach to many things, whereas the Western civilization is more individualistic. So Dumont sees a binary opposite between holism and individualism, and that is a point that Babasaheb makes in this essay, where he talks about caste system, which should be seen as a system. Professor Devi just mentioned that. The systemic kind of an understanding of caste, to see it as a holistic principle. So it is based on the premise of cultural unity and the homogeneity of the Indian civilization that he is proposing, that endogamy is the only characteristic particular to the caste system, since it involves the parceling out of the whole. Okay, that is a kind of an observation that I would like to make on both of his works, mainly on caste. Then another theme that I would like to just broach on is, he deploys his training in classical anthropology to demonstrate and claim critical agency for the oppressed and subjugated subjects. I will come to this point a little later when I come to his intervention in religion. Especially the point of recovery of agency for the oppressed classes comes out very clearly in his book, Who Were the Untouchables and Who Were the Shudras, and both of these books. Then another point that has also been very well explained later by Professor Gail Ombed in Seeking Begumpura and in other Dalits and the Democratic Revolution and other works, is where she picks up this idea of Babasaheb Ambedkar, which is which has similarity to Marxian analysis, where Babasaheb Ambedkar analyzes the history of India as a story of revolution and counter-revolution, the historical forces of Buddhist revolution and the Brahmanic forces of counter-revolution. So that is another area of Babasaheb Ambedkar's interventions, which would be very, very useful to look at the way that anthropology has developed in India as well. Now I come very specifically to the domain of religion, and that is where we will see a couple of very interesting ideas and principles that will be useful to us from Babasaheb's interpretation of Buddhism. Now, in Who Were the Untouchables, Babasaheb Ambedkar positions the untouchables or Dalits as Nagas who were kings, who were rulers. So there is a manner in which these Nagas become the broken men because of the conflict between the local kings and the outsiders who come in. And these rulers and the rulers on subjects become kind of a broken people. So that kind of an idea about a past which he actually talks about, which is very different from the present kind of a situation. And therefore, and then there is also a point that he is making, that in the fight between the people of the land, the native people of the land, and probably the migrants, people who came from the outside world or outside area, where the native people would have been defeated. He's using the kind of understanding of Pule and Periyar and others to say this, And he's saying that the local people were Buddhists. So he argues in a very interesting manner that the Buddhist conversion that he pioneered in 1956 is not something new. It is a return to the fold and the recovery of agency. Return to the fold and the recovery of agency. And in Buddha and his Dhamma, very clearly he enunciates what is Buddhism. And that is another very interesting kind of a distinction that he makes, where he says that there are two kinds of religion in the world. When we talk about world religions, there are two kinds of religion in the world. One is what he calls a religion of rules, and the other is a religion of principles. So the religion of rules is actually talking about what can be eaten when, what need not be eaten when, and all these times and seasons, rituals that need to be performed in a right manner, only then something will happen. Whereas the religion of principles is about values, principles that guide ethical human behavior. And he projects and he says that Buddhism is a religion of principles par excellence. And then he says in the interview that he gave on the eve of the conversion, on the conversion event of 14th October 1956 at Diksha Bhumi in Nagpur, on the eve of that he gave an interview to journalists in which he said that the Buddha is my master, Buddhism is a religion of principles, and the principles on which Buddhism is based is fraternity, equality, liberty. In other words, democracy. And we can see the manner, we can see a lot of reflection in the manner in which Babasaheb proposes Buddhism as an ethically oriented religion best suited for democratic practice. And we can see the reflection of an earlier work of his teacher, John Dewey, who wrote a book at the turn of the 20th century called The Common Faith. The Common Faith, John Dewey proposed a particular kind of a secular religion, which will be very much suited to the secular democracy. You can see a reflection of that in the manner in which Babasaheb Ambedkar proposes Buddhism as a religion of principles. As an aside, he also has this very interesting idea that whenever I conducted interviews, people used to tell me quite openly, that's also a take on the personality of the Buddha in comparison to other founders of religion, which is also there in Buddha and his Dhamma, that Babasaheb is talking about. He said that the Buddha never promised to be a savior. Buddha was also just a person who showed the way. So people used to tell me that Buddha was never a mokshadatta. Buddha was only a margadatta. So the problem with the mokshadattas and their type of religions is that they become the kind of ultimate kind of a source of power, and people who actually act in their kind of name take on certain kind of superhuman power. And people would very clearly tell me Buddhism, that is not the case, because Buddha never kind of made those kind of claims of being a mokshadatta, but only a margadatta. So when we look at, now this, I come to more or less the conclusion of what I would like to say. When we look at the content of Buddhism that Babasaheb talked about, when we read Buddha and his Dhamma, there is a short prologue. And there he very clearly, in very succinct words, actually he actually sets up his agenda when he says that Buddhism of yore has been gone through a lot of transformation. In another essay before that, Buddha and the future of his religion, this particular talk he gave to the Mahabodhi Society's meeting in Kandy in Sri Lanka, he talked about how the dead wood of the past gets accrued to religious traditions, and therefore how we need to chip and take out the dead wood to get back to its pristine historical kind of a tenor. And then he applies that logic in Buddha and his Dhamma, and he explains that as a program in the prologue, when he says that the Buddha never would have agreed to the idea of the Four Noble Truths. Now, if everything is sorrow and everything is like that, it denies hope to humankind, and therefore the Buddha wouldn't have said it. Then he says that, why did the Buddha leave the palace? Everybody says he saw a dead man, he saw a sick person, and all of that. He says it's impossible to imagine a young person, not to say it's all like an extrapolation that has come later. The Buddha left the palace because he wanted non-violence. He brokered peace between the Shakyas and the Kaulyas. And when he realized that they were not listening to him, he left the palace because he did not want to be part of bloodshed. So like that, he has interpreted the kind of mythology which has got accrued to Buddhism. And in a way, Babasaheb Ambedkar, when he took on the project of writing the Buddha and his Dhamma, a couple of biographers whom I've read, they have very clearly said that this is not a finished product because he was not well for a long time. Actually, his health had failed from 1948 and progressively it failed. And Babasaheb Ambedkar could not complete Buddha and his Dhamma as a text. Actually, we are unfortunate. And if he had completed it, it would have been a very much more logically argued text than it is now. So to conclude, I would like to use a couple of other authors who have actually worked on it, particularly M.S. Pandey, his idea about one step outside modernity. Aditya Nigam, whose older work, Secularism, Modernity and Nation Epistemology of a Dalit Critique, and Debjani Ganguly's work, Caste and Dalit Life Works, Post-Colonial Perspectives. Now, when we look at these people's work as well, we see the way in which Babasaheb Ambedkar has projected a particular religion which is aligned with political modernity, democracy, and on the one side, but as a challenge to normative modernity on the other, when he proposes that as an identity religion for the Dalits of India. And you see this kind of a dual emphasis in his interpretation of Buddhism and in the way that he has actually proposed it. So that's it from me. I conclude with this particular observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Joseph, for your nice presentation, and you have done an excellent analysis of the discourses on particularly the religion, the way Dr. Ambedkar has propounded. So it is a nice presentation. We'll invite comments or questions after finishing all the lectures. Now I will invite our next speakers. So he is from a literature background, from the English, Dr. Murshid Alam. So I will congratulate the organizers and especially the Ambedkar Chair for making the seminar an interdisciplinary one, inviting the speakers from various disciplines. So it is a very nice kind of interaction. And now our next speaker is Dr. Murshid Alam. He is an assistant professor in English, Gaud Mahavidyalaya, Malda. He has been in teaching for more than 10 years. His research interest in subaltern life and politics, minor discourses in South Asia, Islamic traditions in South Asia. He has published articles and book reviews in reputed journals like EPW, Rethinking Marxism, Journal of Post-Colonial Writings, Contemporary South Asia Research, Kairos, a Journal of Critical Symposium, etc. He has visited for seminar presentations many national and international universities like Goethe University, Frankfurt, University of Oxford, University of Munster, JNU, Delhi University, Calcutta Research Group, etc. He was also an awardee of Charles Wallace India Trust Fellowship for Archival Research in the British Library in 2018. So this is his brief profile. So now I invite Dr. Murshid Alam. Dr. Alam, the dais is now yours.
Thank you, Professor Midde, for this kind introduction. I would like to begin by thanking Professor Arnav Das, HOD of the Department of Anthropology, Calcutta University, and also Professor Bagchi, the Ambedkar Chair Professor. I remember how Professor Arnav Das approached me, and since I am not a student of anthropology, I was hesitating in accepting the invitation, and he in a way encouraged and enthused me. That is in a way rare in academics. So I remember that I am really honored and touched by that intellectual generosity. So thank you, sir. My talk is titled Ambedkar and his Dhamma, Religion, Hermeneutics and Social Justice. In a way, the previous two speakers have already touched on what I wanted to talk, so maybe I would be repeating what they have already said. Since this seminar is trying to explore the relevance of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar in anthropology today, maybe a few words about why Ambedkar and why his engagement with religion. Religion, anthropologically speaking, has been a significant social category, and there are different structures of religious activities. Anthropology studies both the genesis as well as the evolution of religion. So in that context of anthropological engagement with religion, I wanted to locate this talk and would like to understand the location and function of religion vis-a-vis the question of social incoherence, discrimination and justice. This paper then tries to analyze Ambedkar's engagement with religion in his search for a just and equal society. And in doing that, I advance a threefold argument. First, I analyze why he decided to leave Hinduism and converted to Buddhism. Then I explore his two texts, Buddha and his Dhamma and Buddha or Karl Marx, to underscore his hermeneutical reformulation of Buddhism as a theological route to liberate the Dalits, as well as reconfiguring the position and purpose of religion in society. Then I try to contextualize his hermeneutical exercise with Buddhism by talking about similar activities in India and other parts of the world. And finally, I talk about the social and political significance of his hermeneutical exercise with Buddhism. So first, why Ambedkar left the Hindu fold and converted to Buddhism. As Professor Devi Chatterjee has already mentioned, that Ambedkar was looking for a kind of panacea. He was always guided by his commitment to social justice and bringing about a society based on equality and liberty. So that is the reason why Ambedkar chose to finally move out of the Hindu fold, and this should be viewed as a kind of culmination of his critique of Hinduism, because before finally converting to Buddhism in 1956, he engaged for a long time with Hinduism. He in most of his books he critiqued and criticized the hierarchical aspect in Brahmanical Hinduism, the caste structure, and he waited for the reform, but finally he realized that reform is not possible, because Brahmanical Hinduism is co-substantive with casteism or caste. Therefore, finally he chose to move out of the fold. Ambedkar, but why this turn to Buddhism? That's the question. Ambedkar did not, like the Marxists, discount the importance of religion. He once said, "My ideas are drawn from religion and not from the books on political science." His view of religion, as Christoph Jefferla points out, was overdetermined by social and political concerns. Ambedkar, who believed in the social significance of religion, found Buddhism as espousing a democratic and humanitarian ethos. He thought that the emergence of Buddhism in India was something revolutionary, like the French Revolution. He found a greater affinity between the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, as propounded by the French Revolution, and Buddhism, which he believed advocated similar ideals. Therefore, when presenting the final draft of Indian Constitution to Assembly, in a speech, Ambedkar pointed out that by becoming a parliamentary constituency, India is again back to its Buddhist roots. So therefore, Ambedkar's engagement with and conversion to Buddhism is marked by his search for the democratic rights and social justice for the untouchables. He waited long for reform within the Brahminical Hinduism. However, frustrated with reform, he finally chose to move out of the Hindu fold, as that would ensure, he thought, the liberation of the Dalits from social stigma of caste and salvage their humanity. So now I move on to his engagement with Buddhism and his conceptualization or hermeneutical reconfiguration of Buddhism, with reference to his two texts, Buddha or Karl Marx and Buddha and his Dhamma. Ambedkar's intellectual engagement with Buddhism has a long history. In his introduction to Buddha and his Dhamma, Ambedkar refers to the gift of a book on Buddha given to him by Dada Keluskar in appreciation of his passing the English 4th standard examination. Since then, he developed a lifelong interest in Buddhism. He read the major scholarly works on the history and philosophy of Buddhism, including the complete Tripitaka. His engagement with Buddhism was, however, not just a scholarly one. He was guided by the quest for finding answers to the social and political problems of his time, especially the liberation of the untouchables. Therefore, the question that animated his interest in Buddha's message is, did the Buddha have a social message? Did he teach justice, love, liberty, equality, and fraternity? Could the Buddha answer Karl Marx? These questions are hardly ever raised in discussing the Buddha's Dhamma, Ambedkar observed. My answer, Ambedkar writes, is that the Buddha has a social message. He answers all these questions, but they have been buried by modern authors. So this is, the idea which, and the motive which, led Ambedkar to engage with, and finally to convert to Buddhism. In his text, Buddha or Karl Marx, he makes a comparative analysis of Buddhism and Marxism. He analyzes the, similarities in their objectives as well as in their, and in analysis of the social problem. But where he differs from Marxism is in the means of achieving those goals. Although he points out that Marxism gives primacy to violence, and it talks about the establishment of the dictatorship of the masses, of the proletariat. But Buddha, he thinks, has a different, means of achieving similar goals. He writes, the Buddha's method was different. His method was to change the mind of man, to alter his disposition, so that whatever man does, he does it voluntarily without the use of force or compulsion. His main means to alter the disposition of men was his Dhamma and the constant preaching of his Dhamma. Even in the short text, we can notice that what animates Ambedkar's discussion of the teachings of the Buddha is its social praxis, its commitment to bring about a just and equal social order. This social commitment of Buddhism is what guides Ambedkar in his analysis of the personality and the teachings of the Buddha in his much longer work, The Buddha and His Dhamma. The previous two speakers has already talked about, Ambedkar's hermeneutical engagement with Buddhism. Professor Joseph M.T. has talked about how Ambedkar differentiates between religion and Dhamma, or what he calls religion of rules and religion of principles. So Ambedkar reconfigures Buddhism as a religion of principles that guide ethical human behavior. He writes that Dhamma as a moral principle takes the place of God. So he gives that utmost importance to that ethical principle that Dhamma is. He writes, morality is in Dhamma arises from the direct necessity for man to love man. It does not require the sanction of God. It is not to please God that man has to be moral. It is for his own good that man has to love man. This morality, in order to be a guiding principle for a reconstructed and just society, has to be viewed sacrosanct and universal. Why this moral principle should be sacrosanct and applicable to all? This is to ensure the common good of the society so that it can work as a check on the group interests of those well placed in the society and protect the poor. Ambedkar points out that Dhamma as morality is not conceptualized as rules, but as the guiding principle, because rules do not allow individuals the freedom to act, whereas morality as a principle of caring for the well-being of the society allows the individuals the freedom to do so. Therefore, what is needed is the change of people's disposition so that they can understand that in the well-being of the society lies their personal well-being. Therefore, he talks about the Buddha's teaching on purifying the mind, purifying the tongue, purifying the action, etc. Herein lies Buddha's answer to the Marxists. If craving or amassing wealth is at the heart of the social conflict, because it creates the class difference, Dhamma as principle can work as a check on that. So this is how Ambedkar conceptualizes or reconfigures Buddhism, and his hermeneutical exercise with Buddhism was met with criticism. I would mention some of the points that Ambedkar deviates from the traditional understanding of Buddhism. So as we have already discussed, Ambedkar was motivated by his social and political concerns in his engagement with Buddhism. In doing so, he goes beyond and even rejects some of the traditional understanding of Buddhism. If so, what were his hermeneutical principles? Christopher Quinn points out that the underlying logic behind Ambedkar's interpretation of the Buddha's message were reasonableness, social benefit, and certainty. The Buddha would not have offered teachings that were irrational, that were harmful, or tentative. Guided by this, Ambedkar reformulates some of the core teachings in Buddhism. For example, first, there is no such emphasis on monastic life, meditation and enlightenment, magic and ritual, and divine intervention by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas from celestial Buddha realms and paradise. Second, Ambedkar presents Prince Siddhartha as a leader attuned as much to the political forces of his time as to existential issues of old age, sickness, and death. Third point that he differs from official or traditional understanding of Buddhism relates to Ambedkar's questioning the traditional teaching of karma and rebirth, which are used in Hindu society to explain and justify untouchability, in effect, to blame the victims of social inequality. Further, he also questioned the role of Buddhist monks who seek spiritual perfection while appearing to ignore the material sufferings of the masses around them. Again, Ambedkar did not present the Buddha as infallible. Rather, he points out that the Buddha was always open to change and readjustment of his teachings if they were found inadequate or contrary to reason or the welfare of society. Most importantly, perhaps, Ambedkar questions the efficacy of the Four Noble Truths. Professor Joseph M.K. has already talked about that, how Ambedkar questions it, because if the world is full of sorrow and there is no escape from it, or then that Ambedkar says that makes Buddha's theology a theology of pessimism. So instead of that, he tries to offer a reinterpretation of that, and in that reinterpretation, the Four Noble Truths emerges differently. As Quinn points out, the truth of suffering must include the realities of economic and social hardship. The truth of the arising of the suffering must be broad enough to include the dynamics of caste and class, of economic exploitation and political cruelty. The truth of the cessation of suffering must include the social blessings of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And finally, the truth of the path must be understood to encompass Ambedkar's famous slogan, educate, agitate, organize. That is, cultivate your mind, express your views, and contribute your talents for the good of others. So this is how he reconfigures the traditional understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And this is how this is his hermeneutical engagement with Buddhism. Now, this hermeneutical engagement with Buddhism by Ambedkar was met with criticism. The Buddhist journal Mahabodhi came severely against it because the journal holds that to view the Buddha as infallible and to present the Four Noble Truths differently is quite shocking for a Buddhist. But I think such hermeneutical exercises are important because such hermeneutical exercises draws on the tradition of a religion as well as readjusted it for the contemporary society. So what I would now do is that I would try to locate Ambedkar's hermeneutical engagement with Buddhism by talking about similar attempts in other religious traditions and in other parts of the country. In India and globally, different interpretations of the official institutional doctrine of a religious tradition have been attempted on different occasions. Buddhism itself, as is Jainism, emerged as a countercurrent to the Brahminical Hinduism. And within the Buddhist tradition, Nagarjuna, with his concept of Shunyata, gave a newer understanding of Buddhism as Madhyamika. Within Hinduism, there have been several attempts at reinterpretation also. We can refer to the Bhakti movement of Chaitanya, of Dadu and others. We can also talk about the Sufis and Bauls of Kabir and Lalun, who deviated from the logos of the official doctrine of Islam in their search for an answer to the spiritual needs of the people and for a peaceful and harmonious coexistence. During Ambedkar's own time, the tradition of hermeneutical reinterpretation of religion was carried, we can say, by Gandhi, by Iqbal in Islam, and by many others. In his interpretation of the Mahabharata and the war, Gandhi, quite contrary to Tilak or to common understanding that views that the Gita justifies war or violence, pointed out that the Mahabharata actually shows the futility of war. This reinterpretation of Hinduism also marks Gandhi's notion of ahimsa. Iqbal, in his The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, as the very title suggests, goes on to reconstruct the Islamic philosophical thought in the light of modern science and contemporary societal needs. Based on his idea of khudi, or the self, the individual as a vice regent of God on earth, who embodies the creative potenza of God within him, to create, he talks about a creative reconstruction of the society. As opposed to the common practice of Islamic injunction to divide the property between the son and the daughter, where the daughter will get half of the son, Iqbal points out that such a practice goes against the very spirit of equality in Islam. Therefore, the counter logos or the reinterpretation of logos of a particular religion allows us fresh ideas and practices, practices to emerge which are in consonance with the changing time. There also has been a criticism that Ambedkar's reconfiguration of Buddhism was a political move because in his book Ambedkar and his Dhamma, we not only get in his book Buddha and his Dhamma, we not only get Buddha's Dhamma, we actually get Ambedkar's Dhamma. This is how there have been attempts to criticize him, but I would say that that this critical or this hermeneutical exercise is important, and as already both the previous speakers have pointed out, that Ambedkar has a clear social and political goal. And that was the liberation of the untouchables or the Dalits, and this liberation theology is not new. Theology has worked as a fora for for the empowerment of the oppressed across the world. We come across the liberation theology in Latin America, in the USA, where we find figures like W.E. Du Bois. We find figures like Martin Luther King, who came from their faith background to launch movement for social justice and equality of the oppressed. So we can view Ambedkar's attempt from that point also. Finally, few lines about Ambedkar and his Navayana, which is called a socially engaged Buddhism. This rational, secular, and socially committed understanding of Buddha's Dhamma, as Quinn points out, can be viewed as engaged Buddhism or socially engaged Buddhism. the application of dharma or Buddhist teachings to the resolution of the social problems. Quinn points out that this category of engaged Buddhism has emerged in the context of a global conversation on human rights, distributive justice, and social progress. As a style of ethical practice, engaged Buddhism may be seen as a new paradigm of Buddhist liberation, a fourth yana in the evolution of the Dhamma, or the Navayana. Now, questions can be asked: what is the difference between Ambedkar's politicization or weaponization, if we can say, of religion and that of the right-wing forces across the world? Are they not doing the same as Ambedkar did? We need to make two distinctions here. First, any right-wing or conservative group's politicization of religion attempts to construct religion as a monolithic force and tries to put closer to its interpretive horizon. Any deviation from it is met with disciplinary violence. And there is also a difference in objective. We can hardly deny the importance of religion in people's life. The point is whether we politicize it for hatred and enmity, or to foster equality, fraternity, and freedom guided by questions of social justice. Ambedkar's conception of Dhamma is not the final word here. Rather, rereading or counter-reading of his interpretation is welcome. Such hermeneutical or ijtihadic practice is important, and Ambedkar does give us a direction. We may fall on such practice in our own hermeneutical exercise to find solutions to problems of contemporary society. Their religion can also give us a hope. So I will end here. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Mursid, for your nice presentations, and particularly the not only the discourses on Buddhism or Dr. Ambedkar's thought about Buddhism, but especially for your you have highlighted the background which engaged Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar in, with Buddhism. So that's a nice area, nice domain of analysis, and so you will get many comments or questions on this. Now we have another speakers, Dr. Ravikant Kishana, and I would like to comment on Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's contributions or relevance today, not only in his discourses on religion, but another one you have, Dr. Mursid Alam has rightly pointed out, that the rights of the Dalits are oppressed and the politics on the Dalit side. And another dimension is the politics in connection with the reservation policy or the de-reservation policy. So those areas are also very much relevant today. And so now we can listen to Dr. Ravikant Kishana. If Dr. Ravikant Kishana is with us.
Respected Honorable Chair, I would like to inform that Dr. Ravikant Kishana is present offline with our department, and with the permission of Honorable Chair, I would like to.
You are not audible.
Sir, am I audible now?
Not clearly.
Sir, am I audible now? Sir, am I audible now?
Not clearly, very low voice.
Sir, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'd like to inform Honorable Chair that Dr. Ravikant Kishana is present offline within our department, and I would, with the permission of Chair, Honorable Chair, I would like to call our students to facilitate Dr. Ravikant Kishana.
Okay, we can introduce Dr. Ravikant Kishana.
With the permission of Honorable Chair Dr. Midya, I would like to request Dr. Ravikant Kisana to present his viewpoint on the current session of the seminar, which is on the relevance of Babasaheb Dr. Ambedkar in contemporary anthropology, chaired by Professor Deepak Kumar Midya.
You can introduce Dr. Kisan also.
I would also like to introduce Dr. Ravikant Kisana to the audience. He is currently working as an assistant professor at the Department of Cultural Studies, Flame University. Ravikant Kisana was a doctoral fellow at MICA, Ahmedabad, and Dr. Kisana's area of interest include cultural studies, oral histories and narratives, semiotics, cinema studies and the sociology of internet. Apart from this, Dr. Kisana has a wide variety of interdisciplinary interests and experiences in the diverse field of studies. He has also had a stint in the development sector and the digital startup economy. Before joining Flame University, Dr. Kisana was a part of small team that set up the Opitopedia, that is an oral history based memory project. Now I would like to request, with the permission of Honorable Chair, that you can present your viewpoint in this present session.
So may I now invite Dr. Kisana? The dash is yours now.
Thank you. Is this, am I audible? আমাকে শুনতে পাচ্ছেন? Can the online audience hear? I'm sure you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
The person who are joining online, are you audible? Anybody? Are you audible? Yeah,
You're audible.
thanks.
This is a very strange sitting arrangement because I have to kind of adjust. So,
But now your voice is breaking, sir.
okay. Basically, I have to keep moving my head and the mic. So this is going to be a little challenging. Right? Can I do that? Sorry, online audiences, you'll have to deal with this. You'll have to have a 3/4. This is fine, right? Okay, this is too loud. All right. Thank you everybody for having me here, Professor Bagchi, for calling me all the way from Wardha in Nagpur, where currently I am with the Nalanda Academy in Wardha, which is a grassroots Ambedkarite organization working to train younger marginalized students from rural non-English medium backgrounds to get into premier institutions of India and overseas. So there's a lot that one can unpack from that perspective. Is my voice echoing in the back? You can hear me, na? Okay, take it. So I must say I was a little hesitant because I was called for this event, this great event which is happening, which is trying to kind of connect the work of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar with the domain of anthropology in India. And that I must say is an extremely ambitious and very happy intervention. My own background, as briefly covered in the introduction written for some website some long time ago, is that you know I have some expertise in culture studies, oral histories, and ethnographic work, mostly dealing with sociocultural anthropology. So my insights and my comments today are pertaining to that discipline, not so much related to biological, linguistic or archaeological anthropology. I don't have the training or the insights into that. But sociocultural anthropology is a domain that I kind of would like to comment on, and rather the epistemic understanding of how this domain works. The previous speakers have spoken at length about religion and the hermeneutics of Babasaheb's idea of Buddhism and how it kind of, you know, how he was theorizing about it. I'm going to pivot more towards like how we look at the very structural approach to sociocultural anthropology, especially in India. I'm going to start with this. Actually, I was reading this book. It's one of my One of the books that I've really liked in recent times on contemporary sociocultural anthropology. It's written by this white French guy called Louis Quacon. I'm sure I mispronounce it. Louis Quacon wrote this very interesting book called, for an anthropologist, mind you, very interesting book called Body and Soul, Notebook of an Apprentice. It is an unusual title. It does cause technical malfunctions. Are we clear? Yeah? Okay. So Louis Quacon writes this very interesting book. We think of academics and anthropologists as like, Fab India kurta, jacket, and all of that. Where he writes this book called Body and Soul, Notebooks of an Apprentice Boxer. Somehow when he was in Chicago, he got this idea that he should go into a boxing gym, right? Like, I don't know, he was bored. And while he was training, somebody accidentally hit him hard on the nose. That tends to happen if you're in a boxing ring. And it broke his nose, right? And I think something clicked in his head at that point, and he got really involved in that. And he really started going and adopting the culture of the boxing gyms. And in Chicago, these are black suburban neighborhoods. And he's a white Frenchman. He's not even from the country, and he's of a different race. He has no shot in the world to make a meaningful commentary on black culture. But this boxing gym where he goes and lives and bleeds and sweats, over a period of time, what Bourdieu calls the concept of habitus, right? It becomes a door for him. And the gym becomes a site for him to, study ethno-racial dynamics of the whole region. It becomes a doorway for him to enter the inner lives and anxieties of a community which otherwise he could have only documented, not decoded. Right? He could go and see this is how they are living, but he has no stake in that conversation. And it's a very interesting conversation because black masculinity is playing out, there's racial tension, and ultimately it's a physical activity. You're in a ring with it, you're dancing, you're boxing, there's a dialectic there, right? And he writes an incredible book after that. He's currently, I think, a professor in UC Berkeley. And when I was reading that, I was fascinated by it because unfortunately I've not seen that kind of epistemic commitment coming out from Indian academia, especially in anthropology. I'm not saying that we should all go into a boxing ring and get our nose broken. Might not be a bad idea for some of us, but like it's not something that I find this kind of engagement. And because of that, what I personally feel, and this is obviously subjective, is that we are not generating a lot of anthropological insights which are critically relevant material reflections. What I mean by that is that, let me connect it to a different anecdote of mine, which is when I was reading this book about a white Frenchman in a boxing ring in suburban Chicago, and how he's connecting it to the world, I was reminded of the world of my grandfather, who for 50 years in small town Haryana ran a chai shop which is about half of the size of this table. And him and another man, they didn't have the capital. They were the ones who were supposed to run it. Somebody else owns the shop who would visit once a year. And it's in a small town of Haryana called Narvana. Most of us will not even be able to put it on a map. And it's like everything else in Haryana. It's hot, dusty. And there's like a huge vegetable mandi, not vegetable, mandi. And all the laborers who are coming there, and they are all like lorries and trucks are coming and they're loading and unloading, and they get paid once a week. Nobody has disposable cash. This is one chai shop in the mandi. They are going to come there, and the laborers and my grandfather, none of them know how to do accounting or writing, but they have these interesting systems to keep track of who's had how much chai, or those 3-day-old matri or whatever. And when the once a week salary will come, it will get deducted and all of that. It's a very interesting system that they kind of developed, right? And I would see as a kid my grandfather getting up at, like, his day would start at 3:34 in the morning. It's very ritualized because he has to go, there are things that he has to do with the shop. He has to start the tandoor because whatever, it takes time. And by 5 a.m. the trucks start rolling in, the people start rolling in. They have to have the chai. Without that chai, it sounds very strange. Like, when you're in that world, that small little cup of chai is what keeps that, person going. This back-breaking manual labor, right? You're putting all those wood. It's a subconscious thing. If that chai is 5 minutes late, there'll be a riot, right? There'll be a total breakdown of the system. And it works day after day, week after week, peak summer, peak winter. It's working like clockwork. And everybody knows their spatial understanding of the system. And as a kid, I would go there because, with my grandfather in his peak summer. And even the ones who were not in the shop, the workers, they could tell I was an outsider. They would tell me, boy, don't sit there. You're going to get your face singed. You sit here, you sit there. Everybody had a very deep, it was like, apart from me, everybody in this entire system knows their space. Right? And when I was reading this book by Louis Wacon, I was transported to that world. And I feel that is the power of sociocultural anthropology, because it in a very strange way is generalizable in the sense it decodes a material world for you. And unfortunately, we don't see these doors opening a lot. And that is the very point of anthropology, in my opinion, because if we look at historically, where does anthropology come from? I'm sure all of you know this, but anthropos and logos, right? Like human study, and Magnus Hunt and Otto Kassmann. Now we attribute this to come from that, but the concept of human inquiry is much older, right? Like if you go to the Sulawesi cave paintings in Indonesia, it's like we're talking 45,000 years ago. Somebody is painting on the wall about how you're hunting a wild pig. That is an attempt at documentation of some kind, of maybe it was a particularly difficult pig, who knows? It was a pig who terrorized somebody, or maybe it was a particularly delicious pig, who knows? They've documented it for us, right? And there's always this intellectual curiosity and query which is much older. It's only in the 1800s you start seeing these anthropological societies getting made. And I have a point with this, and I'll connect it to Babasaheb. I'm just historicizing it, right? 1800 you see these progressives making these anthropological societies. In USA, a lot of them are anti-slavery, mind you. This is before the end of slavery. So they're using anthropology as a means to challenge the ideas of racial superiority. This is before Darwin also, right? So their job is particularly difficult at this point in time, but they're doing it. And they're relying very heavily on comparative methods in the 1800s. And then, of course, you go into the 20th century, who still form the core of our anthropology syllabus, your Malinowski, Mead, Claude Levi-Strauss, Boas, cultural relativism and all of that. What they're doing now is, this is this idea of an outsider-insider, right? Like trying to decode human society. You're going and you're documenting and all of those things you're bringing in. What I'm trying to emphasize is that from Magnus Hunt and even before to Malinowski, this is a discipline which is very intellectually flexible, which has always aspired to take newer methodological and epistemic approaches. This is not an academic discipline which is rooted in conservatism. It has taken whatever means intellectual discourse of the time has thrown at it to kind of unpack these challenges. When Darwin comes with the origin of species and the theory of evolution, there's a rush to try and incorporate Darwin's ideas into this field of social science. There is an attempt to do that because, Darwin was not really talking about human societies. In fact, he has a very famous quote about it also. He was talking about biology, but this idea that, we have to kind of connect these different spaces. And my point is that, there has always been an attempt in this discipline that which has now come to be called anthropology, as it has been going through the ages, is that it is methodologically flexible, and the only commitment is to kind of be able to decode the world, human habitus, our experiences, our rituals, our behavior, what motivates us, right? Like, I'm particularly interested in those questions. Like, I arrived today here for the seminar, and I was immediately transported back to the days when I was a student in this part of the world. Like, there were two master's students, immaculately dressed, waiting at the gate. Right, as soon as I entered, like, there's this almost falling over, like, sir, you're here, and I'm trying to make a conversation with them. You're a master's student. You're at an advanced level of inquiry. You're my peer. I'm trying to talk to you. Okay, you're masters. What are you interested in? But I could see the palpable tension. Eta syllabus e baire. This is not what is supposed to happen. You're a guest. We'll greet you. You will go. We'll serve you chai, hand you the folder. Here's your bottle, and we're done, right? And then you're in, and then I will chill with my friends and, like, wait till my next assigned role is coming. And here I am asking you questions, like, what are you interested in? My God, what if I give a wrong answer now? And at that exact moment, catastrophe. He tries to press the lift, and the lift goes off. He misses it by a second because I asked him a question. Catastrophe. He's apologizing. Sir, I'm so sorry, the lift is gone. I was like, yeah, lifts tend to do that. No, I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry, sir. Why are you sorry? No, sorry. It's a rather humorous exchange. I gave up after a while because I figured that, the more I try to talk and put this gentleman to ease, he is going to become more nervous, right? So I gave up after a while, and I was quiet. But I'm very interested in the fact that these are anthropology master's students. And the educational institution, whether it is Calcutta University, Jadavpur University, JNU, Ashoka University, has a very interesting politics within itself. I did mention to him, we are academics, we are not in a feudal institution. He did not get it, right? But that's what I'm trying to decode here. That's the point of anthropology, that we question and we critical and we understand this. And that is what I'm trying to kind of hint at, that, we seem to have a lack of grammar. Sorry to borrow this term from, I'm interdisciplinary, so I use this word very easily and jump from field to field. We don't seem to have the grammar to decode some of these power systems, which are defining the very way our daily rituals, communications, behaviors, and motivations are happening. And here's connecting it back to the conference, because we had a scholar who seemed to have given us a tremendous insight on doing exactly that, right? When I look at the works of Dr. Babasaheb, and the previous speakers have spoken a lot about hermeneutic inquiry on his religion and all, I'm going to just comment from this strain of thought that I'm kind of building in this talk. Is I've singled out 6 primary works, although every work of Babasaheb is incredible. But if you look at castes in India, development and mechanism, right? If you look at who were the Shudras, riddles in Hinduism, right? Untouchables, who were they and how did they become untouchables? Or Buddha and his Dhamma, and of course Annihilation of Caste. This is very interesting because he represents before Babasaheb, if you look at the anthropological work which is happening in India, it is a meticulous documentation. There's an obsession with documentation. If you look at all these old anthropological descriptions, they've done a good job of that, I would even say. All these Asiatic society and all of these, I call it the Orientalist gaze and imperial gaze. Not all of them were white, but the framework was, and it was pretty much going in that direction. And in that mix, almost like it was not planned, because it wasn't, comes this guy. He comes from a marginalized community. He was not supposed to get educated, but he did. He was not supposed to have reached Columbia University, but he did. And while emerging as a tremendous civil rights leader in his own right, as a political mobilizer in his own, as one of the tallest mobilizers in his own right, while in Columbia University, he also takes very interdisciplinary training much before the term interdisciplinary was, run into the ground by average mediocre scholars like me. To hide my mediocrity, every time somebody says, oh, you don't know enough about the field, I say, I'm interdisciplinary, deal with it, right? But much before that, he took a very interdisciplinary training in history, in anthropology, and because this domain is supposed to be methodologically flexible, we have to take his works as canon in that sense. And it is surprising that these 6 fundamental texts that I'm talking about which should be fundamental reading in any social science program within South Asia, not just India, right? Because you look at the polity of Nepal and Pakistan and Bangladesh, and Pakistan, for instance, is tremendously, if you're bold enough, you can call it a tribal society in the sense, because there's so many different tribal politics which is playing out, which is completely sort of invisibilized in a very different way. So it's very relevant for all of South Asia in that sense, and yet these texts are not anywhere. We don't see an engagement with these texts, and there's almost like going back in time. We are repeating the same thing. Like last year in July, I was doing fieldwork in Uttarakhand with the One Gujars. They're a very interesting community. They're still semi-nomadic, and they are now, the areas where they used to do migration with their buffaloes is now been, after the 80s, made into a national park. So now they're suddenly in conflict with the state, and they've done this for hundreds of years. And I was doing fieldwork there, and there's this another Canadian white scholar, young guy, well-meaning, he'd come there and done his whole PhD on the One Gujars. There's not a lot of academic work, a lot of NGOs working there, yes, but not a lot of academic work. So I read his work, I read his PhD, and I was struck that this guy in 2010-12 is actually writing exactly like how the colonial imperial gaze was writing about these communities 100 years ago. Detailed description of the Gujar and the Patwari and there's one whole chapter on when the forest officer comes and what is their dynamic. But as somebody from the community, there's absolutely no material reflection on what it means. And I was trying to kind of decode that knowledge for, the people in the community who were the main interlocutors. This guy worked hard. He came all the way from Canada. He traveled. He did migration with them in the buffalo and everything and all that. But when I was trying to explain to the community, this is what he thinks, or this is the academic work which has been generated. And I'll never forget what this person told me, Hamza. He was like, "Isse acha to hamare likh dete." He was like, "We can do a better job than this." And I don't doubt that, right? And that's the difference of location and gaze in terms of determining material realities. And what Babasaheb's work should have been, in my opinion, again it's subjective, should have been a springboard to a new academic vitality into the discipline. But instead we find a stasis. It's almost like the genre unlocking works of this man didn't exist. It's almost like Indian academia doesn't know what to do with it. So it just exists independent. I did a BA political science program when I was doing my undergraduation in political science. There was not a single reading on Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. Reading, forget a course. There's a course called Constitution of India, so we heard the name, but there was no reading on political science. A man who has in that discipline has immense contribution. It's almost like we don't know what to do with him. So we put him away, resurrect him once in a while in a conference, and we talk, and then it's put away, right? And meanwhile, there is like a strange obsession with rethinking Gandhi, right? Like, the entire departments and, entire domains building on that. And even when Dr. Ambedkar has to be spoken about, he has to be spoken about in relation to Gandhi, right? Like it's very fascinating, the epistemology of this. I have no quarrel with Gandhian scholars in that sense. I mean, I do, but not academically. But I'm just talking about the epistemology of this, right? How this is playing out. And this is what I mean by this domain. Like, there's a stasis. Like Ram Guha, for instance, writes a essay in 2001 called Anthropologist Among Marxists. Catchy title. Till you realize that, it is based off a 1987 article by Bern Cohen called Historian Among, an Anthropologist Among Historians. Right, like, so it's a takeoff. Everything is a copy of a copy of a copy. It's a bold statement, please don't come at me, right? Apart from, I would say, maybe D.D. Kosambi Sr., personally speaking, I find like there's a very sorry to say, a lot of insipid scholarship in this domain. And I can say that from the kind of community that I come from and the kind of positionality that I have, and these works don't speak to me. They may be very academically sound, but they don't speak to me. And coming back to my grandfather and the world he inhabited, or my maternal great-grandfather, who was a clerk in the colonial railway system and the migration that he did from Punjab all the way to Burma, and that branch of the family, a lot of them had deep political and social insights, which was much richer than academic works. And here's a sad part, as young academics, as young anthropologists in the making, I must tell you a big secret. Everybody thinks that anthropology is unemployable. That is a lie. There's a big intellectual and academic market for anthropology. Everybody needs these insights. Everybody in the world is attempting that. Look at journalists. Every time there is an election, there is a pop anthropology, pop ethnography is happening. You open the Indian Express, UP election, explainer, who are the Nishad community? Arre? This is the job of the anthropologist, which the journalists are doing, right? Or, Jyoti Yadav recently went into rural UP and she wrote a series called, she coined a new term, which I really like, called Generation Nowhere. She's talking about youth, mostly Bahujan youth, stuck in small towns with no real material progression possible, but they have in their hands a smartphone with a geo connection. So there is a different kind of reality. So they are in their phones all the time, constantly. They're exposed to reels and TikTok and memes just like anybody else in posh South Calcutta, right? So there is and this is the work which I would have expected a young, ambitious anthropologist to do, but a journalist is doing that. Vasepur and Mirzapur has to be brought to us by film directors and TV directors, as problematic and cliched as that gaze is. But in a Yash Raj film set in a small town India, you see the weave of the sweater or the decor of the, it's far more authentic than the kind of academic papers that one keeps hearing in the same conferences. So it's almost like everybody is doing the work of the anthropologist except the anthropologist. So it's an interesting way to kind of look at it. Or even digital anthropology. I'm just going to wrap this up. Like the terms IT cell, memes, these are mass words now. Elections have been won and fought and lost on this for 10 years now, right? And yet, to the best of my knowledge, I don't know of a single digital anthropology conference in this country or a single digital anthropology book in this country that has been written definitively. The politics, the sexuality, pornography, cultural behavior, all of these.
If you conclude.
Yes, I'm just 2 minutes. Yeah. All of these are not being kind of addressed. So I see an epistemic gap here. And in this, I would like to conclude that, if you look at the works of Gay Lombard, if you look at the works of even political mobilization of Kanshiram, when he's talking about local myths, Suhel Dev, Ravidas, Ayan Kali, Mahatma Phule, Harichand Thakur, all of these are public oral histories which are yet to be decoded academically in a meaningful and a massively relevant way. And Anup Keri's work on higher education, it's only Harvard anthropologists are now writing on Indian education. Ajanta Subramaniam, Ambedkarites have been doing that for 15 years. The great work which Kufir and the Roundtable team have been doing in that sense. Or Professor Khalid Ansari talking about Pasmanda Muslims for about 10-12 years now. Online, on Facebook, not in journals. So I think there's something to unpack here, and on that note I will conclude that in 25 years time, when we have another milestone review conversation of 125 years of Indian anthropology, maybe we'll have a better review, and maybe by that time Babasaheb will not just be in a conference, maybe the syllabus of this exact department which is doing this conference should also have some of Babasaheb's readings, maybe a paper, let's not get too ambitious, right? But a reading or two would be fine once in a while. Alright, thank you for tolerating me, and have a nice day. Jai Bhim.
Thank you, Dr. Kisana, for your nice talk. Though not always within the on the topic of today's discussion. However, I am now inviting questions or comments from the audience, from the participants, and my request is to, when you are offering any comments or questions, please mention the speakers to whom you are asking the questions.
Hello. Yeah. Do you have any query or questions from audience? Anybody have any questions, sir? Hello. Anybody have any questions? So Professor Dr. Dash has a question.
Yeah.
I have no question really. That is, all the speakers have been excellent. So my position is not to judge the excellence or whatever. But one thing I will ask you, that is, more we were patient to listening you, we were enjoying it very much. That is, the kind of very enthusiastic ambience was created. But I found that what you tried to make a network of. So if it is possible, that is in a very scholastic manner, that is like a syllabus, like a thing, you could prepare a kind of anthropology or ethnographically oriented, more better to say than anthropology, oriented Ambedkar and other movements, and make a comparison, because you have this kind of orientation at the same time involvement with different, that is groundworks, movements. So that will be request on behalf of the department. Thank you.
Your comment?
Sure, please pay me, I'll do it. Jokes. Yes, yes. Because labor needs to be compensated. No, jokes aside, would be very happy to do it. Thank you. Of course.
Any question? Ma'am, you have a question? Okay. Do you have, sir, do you just go for a chat box if any question from online audience? Pranjal, any question?
There was a question in the chat box, sir, by Pia Ghosh Dastidar earlier.
Yeah. Sir, can you please, no questions. Can you please just read the question for us?
I lost it because I lost the connection. Yeah, maybe she will be able to.
Okay. Pranjal, can you please see the question? Okay, actually we also lost the connection of that particular question. So I'm sorry, Pia. We'll get it later. Okay, fine. But the few interesting insights from my side. Thank you all, and thank you for coming here, Ravi. And it's really very good, very smoothing, ear smoothing to see you and to listen to you. One thing is that I am very much, close from 2000 to 2003. Jat community and some Himachalis, and I did my third field work in Himachal. Yeah. So the thing is that when I came back in Delhi and the institute like Calcutta and try to serve over here, I think as a anthropologist, though I don't think that I'm an anthropologist because it needs a huge, huge effort. Not only academics, rather, it needs a huge effort to be an anthropologist, to be a person like anthropologist. Because at that particular moment, if I really try to attract you by wearing a Fab India, and inside me, I'm not at all, I'm very much South Calcutta posh family guy. I'm not at all anthropologist, it's my purview. The point is that we are discussing for last one day till yours regarding different dimension of Babasaheb. Even if when we finished our lecture, we used to Jai Bhim, right? The thing is that, are we really interested, or is just a mere of exercising an academic intercourse? If that is so, that as an academician, as an anthropologist, as an interdisciplinary person like you, though I must say that we are also interdisciplinary, but anthropology is basically is a foundation of interdisciplinary, and we also know that nowadays, Ravi, we are transcending from inter to transdisciplinary. So we are creating new knowledge based on that, where one hand we have endogamy, and as in biological anthropology, I talking about endogamy, I'm talking about civil right, R.A. Fisher, who are getting a different kinds of model to understand the intermarry or the relationship between couples within the particular community, and then try to understand the background of it. The question comes from typically an ethnographic discourse. There's nothing to do with biology, and that's the unique beauty of it. That's the essence of it, where I can find the in-depth insight of anthropology, how it blended, like Assam tea and Darjeeling tea, right? It's a blended tea. The thing is that as an anthropologist, as a person in academics, serious academics, or as an activist, what is a call to address our next generation or our entire fraternity, how to deal with it? Because at the end of the day, you cannot declass yourself, right? Or if you don't know to declass yourself, then at the same time you try to want to be a good anthropologist. So first you have to go for a declass yourself, then go for an anthropologist, or it's just a different view. People are very confusing about it. As a teacher, as an anthropologist, or as a course worker over here, I used to see that particular thing, because at the exactly we're talking about this, sir, apni eshechen, please ashun. It's a very nimble why like that. But still, one hand we have a feudalistic intervention in the discourse. At the other hand, we are enjoying to say that we are radical, we wanted to break down all these things. But how can it happen? If you really, as a person, we are not like that actually. We are basically a salaried person, correct? So what is your input? Maybe I'm so much radical over here. Sorry for that.
And I'll just give some brief comments, because you've given me a very big burden to kind of address the fraternity and students. I'm a very mediocre academic, so I don't know. That's debatable. But what I would like to say is two things. First, like, your point that, everybody, all anthropologists start by saying, I'm not an anthropologist. So let me change it. I am an anthropologist now. So everyone has to deal with it. Okay, so I think we can just claim it now. As far as this question about this, see, I'm not sure like whether this is whether this is an acceptable thing to say, but we seem to be at a political moment in India where the person on that flex is changing. You go back 20 years ago, that's Gandhi, right? There's a conference after conference after Gandhi. Now Gandhi seems to have lost his relatability. Maybe he was made into an icon of Swachh Bharat and co-opted by the current regime. So now there's a need of a new icon. The thing with Babasaheb Ambedkar is that unlike Gandhi, he actually has a very strong, vocal, assertive, mobilized community. So putting Babasaheb in a conference room, if the politics of the institution outside the conference room are not reflecting, they're two very different things. Very soon what will start happening is such interventions or special editions or will itself start losing legitimacy. At a time in India when what are core Ambedkarite mobilizations relating to education? Opportunity, dignity. Reservations are under attack across. When our students do get into educational institutions, they are hounded perpetually by the question of merit. OBC reservations are less than 30 years old in this country. SC/ST reservations, like, people hide. Not one single school I know in this country sensitizes young students about what is reservation. People still think it is a poverty alleviation scheme. It is a representational scheme. Departments after department in management studies, engineering, whatever, you don't see that commitment, the social commitment to dignity. The number of students who are dropping out, even more somber, student suicides. Faculty from IIT Madras alleging discrimination. So in this atmosphere where the few assertive voices are being really, really cornered, having a conference on Babasaheb these are two contradictory things. So that itself very easily. So if Babasaheb has to be brought into this space, and if we are, I don't know about radical or not radical, if we are trying to kind of learn something from the great man, then a conference or a publication cannot be the end of it, right? So it has to involve a much deeper, and for that all of us need to do a lot of unlearning. The student who was apologizing to me for the lift going off, it's not his personal fault. He's a product of the system which has conditioned him. He has seen his seniors do it, he's seen his teachers do it, and professors, when somebody from the ministry will come, will do the exact same thing, right? So they're the product of that system. A lot of us have a lot of unlearning to do, right? So that would be the comment, and what that unlearning will be, I don't know.
Sir, Professor Deepak Nidya, yours, yes, sir.
Yes. Dr. Priya Ghosh Dostidar has a question. Priya Ghosh Dostidar, he raised a question that...
Yeah, I got a question. Sir, this question is for whom?
Dr.
Is it?
Ambedkar chose Buddhism because Hinduism has caste and gender-based inequality. But we also know that Buddhism also had some writings where women are considered lower entities than men. So there is also gender-based inequality. So it is her comment. So if you make further comments on that. And if any other comments from any of the participants online or offline.
Sir, for the question that asked by one of the participants, I think, maybe Professor Joseph M.T. may ask, maybe comment on this particular question given by Priya Ghosh Dostidar or Murshid. Anybody else?
Yes, sir. May I attempt something to answer that question?
Yeah, of course, sir. Please go ahead. Please.
Obviously, looking at religious texts from a gender lens is very important critique, and also so is a kind of interpreting religious texts from a gender inclusive kind of a language, and that is something that is being done across board. And I agree with that questioner when she talks about looking at with a gender lens. There are Buddhist texts which obviously would be very differently taken. But if you look at Babasaheb's idea about interpreted Buddhism or interpreting Buddhism, anything that goes against the principles of equality, fraternity, liberty on the one side, and anything which does not does not conform to those principles and to the human reason. Now, Babasaheb Ambedkar works with an enlightenment notion of rationality. Now, if something that does not conform to any of these, if that is there in any kind of a religious text, and obviously in the Buddhist text, Babasaheb Ambedkar would say it is an addition that has come later from vested interests and that needs to be out. And there is no doubt about it. That is what we see very clearly mentioned in that paper that I and another speaker mentioned, the Buddha and the future of his religion. In that particular paper, he has mentioned that. Also, like Sharmila Rege has brought together Babasaheb Ambedkar's intervention with regard to kind of from a gender perspective in her book, Against the Madness of Manu. So there is a book available where she has brought together many of his ideas into that. And even in Caste of India, when he begins to mention the idea of the surplus woman, there is a way in which he introduces the notion of patriarchy, what we talk about today. He mentions that there very clearly in obviously different kind of terminology. So looking at from Babasaheb's perspective, anything that is kind of a discriminatory towards any genders would not be part of a text that Babasaheb would actually visualize because of his entrenched kind of ideas on the principles of equality, fraternity, liberty, and enlightenment rationality. I hope that answers your query. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph, for your nice comment. If any other question or comment?
Yes, sir. We have a question from audience.
Sir, myself, Ritabrata Mukherjee. My question is from you, Ravikant, sir. Sir, as far as my knowledge of sociology and anthropology is concerned, I consider myself very naive in this field, though. But as far as my understanding is concerned, I feel that the two subjects, sociology and anthropology, tends to see or look into the equilibrium of society and individual from two perspectives. One tries from the end of society to the individual, and the other one tries from the end of individual to the society. Now, the relevance of Ambedkar lies when we can make a model, concave lens model. So, sir, how do you think that such concave lens model can be implemented in educational institution, like where Ambedkar can be made relevant?
One thing, who are you? Please say your name. You are not visible well.
Yeah.
You are not visible well for
Sir,
online participants.
Sir, myself, Ritabrata Mukherjee. Sir, can you see me and hear me? Sir, myself, Ritabrata Mukherjee, and my question was to Ravikant, sir, as far as my understanding of sociology and anthropology.
I think the way to...
Can I ask a question? Hello?
After Dr. Ravikant's comment, you can put your answer, yeah?
Okay, so the way I would respond to that is one thing we have to kind of, which is also connected to what the previous question he was asking, Professor was asking, was I think we have to look at Dr. Ambedkar's contributions beyond just the text. There has to be a very holistic engagement at multiple levels, right? So how do we make him relevant? One is, first of all, which is not even at a very basic level happening, which is like foundational readings are not being shared. It's not in the syllabus, right? Which is, I would assume, the easiest to fix, but obviously not happening. You can understand why, right? But then beyond that also, before changing anything in the administrative policy about admission, inclusion, redressal, you also look at knowledge production. When you look at research on caste, you can go into the EPW archives and all of these. It's actually now a repository, right? You can see 50 years and when you look at the intellectual work which is being done, knowledge production which is done, research is always looking at the Dalit community, tribal. That is when you're visible as an object or unit of analysis. You look at media, caste story is what? Like caste story will be atrocity, manual scavenging, or every year when DU cutoff is 90, 100%, then there will be a reservation story. It's like an annual ritual of the journalist, right? What is not discussed in caste is also, right? You step out of exactly this building, from here on Baligan Circular Road, Southern Avenue, all the way down, and you look at the spatial reality of the space, right? In Pune, where I used to live, in those neighborhoods, if you were from SC/ST background, you were not going, and Muslim, you were not going to be given a home. Straightforward. This is not seen as caste. To give you a more young audience, let me give a very interesting example. Recently I was speaking to a journalist. She was doing a story on Tinder and Bumble and online dating, right? And she reached out to me for the caste angle. Now what is caste angle? Caste angle is ki there is some SC/ST girl and somebody has said, oh, you SC/ST, we matched, or something like that, right? I'm not denying that things like that don't happen, but that's obviously comically casteist. Like that's caricature. Like that person has to be particularly tone deaf and foolish and mean to be able to say that. What I was instead saying was, look at the aesthetics of what makes a good Tinder profile. Right? Foreign trip, Kutta Billi photo, right? Some Sylvia Plath quote, right? If it is boys, they will be, on some bullet. If it is women, they will be on a Goa beach with a wine, right? Makeup. So now, who has the cultural capital and the sophistication to do this? And what is a good online dating conversation? We will sit and talk about How I Met Your Mother, Game of Thrones. Who has the cultural capital to subscribe and buy into this? So my point to her was, there is a caste angle to this online dating app. It is an entirely upper caste app. Elite upper castes are bored, and it is a visual documentation of Savarna lives. That story will not get written because that's not caste. Are you understanding? So if I have to write about Baniyas, for instance, right? Isn't it for gender studies, isn't it a feminist question? Why is there no feminism amongst Baniya women? Fascinating. A community which for intergenerationally, very openly have used women as social capital to bring kinship ties together and secure credit for each other. Happening even today. We joke about it. Ambani's daughter will marry someone, right? These are the memes that are shared. And yet you will see amongst young Baniya women, they'll give the best education, they will wear feminist AF t-shirt, but then go and do happily dance on the stage, bole churiya on somebody's engagement. There's no contradiction on this. I am fascinated by this. Right? Calcutta itself, one last comment, Calcutta itself, like I grew up in this city, I'm not from here ethnically, but I grew up here. And while growing up, there are two different worlds I clearly saw. There was a very clearly Brahmin and a Baniya conflict in this city. Baniyas have separate schools. There's a Birla school network, they all go there. If you go there, they hardly find any Bengali, and especially, in that sense. And they have their own colleges, Bhawanipur and all of that. After they'll graduate from Bhawanipur, they have their own life. They're all driving around raat ko 8 baje, 9 baje and having cold coffee. To them, the Bengali Brahmin culture is bore. Like all day they sit and talk about Tagore and Ray and what is all this. On this side, the Baniyas look, oh, these unintellectual cretins, all they do is drive around, go to Bhaggu and all that. There's a clear social conflict. I have not read a single commentary on it. But entire bookshelves are full of, oh, there's a conflict between Chamar and Mahar, Pasi and Dhobi. So for me, this is fascinating. So even forget anything else. This is also my point. Like, this is how you make Babasaheb relevant. What about caste is not just a SC/ST or OBC issue. Right? It is the other way. Where is the gaze on that? Where is the research on that? Try doing a PhD on that. Try finding a supervisor who will agree with that. है ना?
Sir, we don't have any question now. I think we have
We have only
a question, online question. Yeah. Sir, please.
May I now, we can take another question from Sima Ahmed.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible, Sima. Please.
Okay. At the time, Ambedkar accepted Buddhism as a theological mechanism to combat inequality and injustice. But in today's crisis, how Dalits, non-Buddhists, minority or oppressed will get inspiration from Ambedkar, or what path Ambedkar will show in today's crisis, not only to combat caste crisis, but also other injustices? Thank you.
Sorry, you're muted. Sorry, you're muted.
I don't have
Can I repeat?
no particular speaker. I think.
Okay. Can I request Dr. Joseph to comment on this?
Yes.
Yeah, I shall be happy to. Yeah. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's politics was, as I mentioned, different edges. One of the edge is the struggle for social justice enshrined in the triad of educate, agitate, organize, which was a call to the untouchables and other oppressed classes, and that still remains. Now, obviously, when the conversion to Buddhism happened in Maharashtra so much, and it so happened that majority of the people of Babasaheb Ambedkar's own jati became Buddhists, and many others did not. But the Ambedkarite ideology of the educate, agitate, organize is something that has galvanized everyone, every kind of untouchable caste, though they did not convert to Buddhism. And we also now know that the conversion to Buddhism as a template was not just there at the time of Babasaheb. G. Aloysius has done this research on Shakya Buddhism of Tamil Nadu. That is, at the turn of the 20th century, there was Pandit Ayoti Das and Lakshmi Narasu and a couple of many other leaders who led the prior community of Kolar Goldfields in Chennai into Buddhism. That is there. So and the other kind of an angle of Babasaheb Ambedkar is his anchorage in liberal democracy. He was out and out a liberal democracy person. And it is from that platform he fashions a program of reform, a program of social revolution through Buddhism. So even if you don't access Babasaheb Ambedkar through Buddhism, you can access him as a liberal leader, you can access him as a crusader for social justice, you can access him as a Democrat, and as a Democrat who actually participated in who had this idea of democracy as a deliberative kind of a system where you deliberated on issues passionately and came to certain kind of a decision, a common kind of a decision in the interest of the nation. He was very much rooted in that. And in that, he is very relevant for today when we don't have that kind of a deliberative discussion in the public sphere anymore. Our public spheres are becoming echo chambers. So that is where his relevance is still there very much, even if you are not a Buddhist.
Hello, sir. Sir, I think we are running short of time. Should we? Yes, sir. Please conclude. Thank you, sir.
Now, so before closing this session, I must congratulate and express my thankfulness to the head of the department, the Ambedkar chair, and all the faculties and staff of the Department of Anthropology, Calcutta University, for organizing an international seminar on this vibrant issue, the issue on social injustice and discrimination. And also to all the speakers, Professor Devi Chatterjee, Dr. Joseph MP, Dr. Murshid Alam, and Dr. Ravikant Kisana for having nice presentations on the issues. And also, I am also thankful to all the participants offline and online, and for making this session very, very successful. And I also at the same time express my inability. I am sorry that I could not join offline because of this bond and the subsequent circular of the government to remain on duty. So I could not join offline, but still you have allowed me to join in this session. So thanks to the Department of Anthropology and the organizers. So over to the organizers.
Thank you, sir, for being with us. Thank you. It's a nice session altogether. I think we are very prompt about our time, and we have 5 to 7 minutes. So though we don't have any tea break in the particular session, but still I think as Ravi told us, the chai is very important for every sphere of life. So I think we need a cup chai. So let's go for a tea. Thank you. We'll come within 5 to 7 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay. So I am leaving. So this is the end of this session. Next, there will be valedictory session.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We are waiting for Professor Abhijit Duar's speech, one of the brilliant speakers among the contemporary anthropologists.
Okay.
So we are waiting for his speech and we will join.
Sir, actually we have announced for a tea break now. So audience are going for a tea. Yeah. After 5 to 10 minutes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone.